Welcome to Aircrew Interview. I'm Mike Young, your host, and this is part 2 of our interview with Paul Godfrey. In this episode, Paul chats about returning from his US Air Force exchange tour to fly the mighty Typhoon, joining the BBMF flying the Spitfire and Hurricane, his TV work, and also being part of the brilliant Pilot Episodes podcast. I want to thank our sponsor, Flying Graphics, who produce high-quality aviation t-shirts and offer a wide range of aircraft and styles to choose from, such as jets, warbirds, rotary, transport, their iconic collection, plus much more. They have sizes from small to 4XL and offer worldwide shipping, so make sure you head over to their website at www.flyinggraphics.com to check out all their great designs. Well, it sounds like you had a great time, like we say, on the F-16, but then you went back to the UK and you actually managed to fly the Typhoon. So what was this like, and how did your training begin?
I was really excited about this. As I said before, at the end of my time on the Harrier, I was kind of angling to get onto this brand new aeroplane that's going to be the future of the Royal Air Force. And actually, when I came back, I ended up in a ground tour, so I was involved with the Typhoon because I was what was called a requirements manager. So I was responsible for weapons and mission planning systems on the Typhoon before I even got to fly it.
Right.
I was then selected to go to 3 Squadron, the squadron behind us, as the first operational squadron. And so I'd spent a lot of time in close proximity to the guys going through the startup of the Typhoon, which wasn't easy. Any new aeroplane that comes into service, you're going to find snags, there's going to be issues, all sorts of things happening. You're working out stuff for the first time. But the very first time you then go and get in and fly that aeroplane, you think, oh my God, this is a world beater. Whether everything was working on day one or not, it didn't matter because...
And you generally felt that when your first time in Typhoon?
Yeah. All of a sudden you're at 55,000 feet. You pull G up there, there's not many other airplanes that can get up there. When you're down at low level, you do a low level acceleration. I have never in my life felt anything like that. If you ever seen, I can't remember which James Bond film it is, but Roger Moore's stuck in the centrifuge and it's like that. It kind of feels like that. You go down low level acceleration over the sea, you plug the burners in, I think it was about 200 knots. You feel a real kick, it's a real kick in the backside, your head's on the back of the headrest. And then, honestly, you start to see the numbers winding up where it goes 200, 210, 250, 260, 290, 300, 350, 400, 450, and it's accelerating that quickly. We had a low-level speed restriction at the time, and it was almost pulling your hand up to there to get to the throttle to pull it back, to stop it going through 600 and something knots. Down at low level, it would have gone supersonic and just kept going at low level.
And I think you had a brilliant quote. I can't remember. It might have been with James May, what you took up, and it was like something about an angel. What was that?
Homesick Angel.
That was it. Homesick Angel.
I stole that off of someone. I don't know who it is, so I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry. But she did. She climbs like a homesick angel. Yeah. Just wants to keep going. Mm-hmm. And so, with an airframe like that, you've got a world beater.
Yeah.
Because it can dominate the battle space. It can be up at 55,000 feet going supersonic, super cruising, that sort of thing. So as once we started the operational squadron, we'd ironed out all the kinks in the aeroplane. It was amazing. Mm-hmm. I loved it, where we'd come in, a 4-ship of us, be fighting a bunch of F3s, and just simple things where the F3s weren't used to putting their radars all the way up here where we were coming in from above the contrails. Yeah. You're not going to see us visually. And because you are so high and so fast, you impart additional energy onto your missiles. So now you've got ranges that we hadn't seen before on this Typhoon. And we were, cleaning up. It was utterly brilliant.
I feel sorry for the F3 because that's my favourite aircraft. It sounds like you didn't.
I'm not taking it away from those guys. They just hadn't fought, something like us before. They soon worked it out, and then it was a much harder fight. But brilliant. And the way we then stepped up from just short deployments in the UK, then overseas deployment, and then putting it on QRA for the first time. It was a big moment. I was the flight commander in charge of getting us ready for quick reaction alert. And, it's a big thing. That's something that I never particularly realized throughout my flying career up until that point. Yeah. How, maybe stressful is not the word, but how you have to be doing this right all of the time. Because the bell cannot go.
Mistakes.
Yeah, the bell cannot go and you not be ready to run out and get the airplane airborne within your allotted time, which is in single minutes. And so getting the aeroplane ready, understanding how it works, are there any issues, making sure we have the weapons loads, making sure the command and control is good, how are we servicing the aeroplanes on a daily basis, how are we doing this, have we got the pilots to keep doing this every day of the year. This is 365 days a year, 24/7.
And sometimes I don't think the public appreciate that what you guys do.
No, they definitely don't. And even within the military, people don't have the appreciation of what is going on there, because if you take Coningsby or Lossiemouth, and I was fortunate in my last job to be the station runner up at Lossiemouth, you cannot fail in that role. There are certain things you can say, no, I'm not going to do that. You cannot fail in that role. So everything on the station. So if you take Lossiemouth, that had been a tornado squadron, when you convert it to a 24/7 base, it wasn't 24/7 previously. Yeah, there would have been a sort of operations room and that sort of stuff, but not in the way that you need to be able to feed people. You need the operations there. You need the connectivity to the various reporting sites around the country, the radar sites and so on, the master controllers and that sort of thing. Kind of it takes over your life. And when you consider as well that we're busy, so you go away, going to do a deployment, the first thing you're doing when you get back is sitting on QR8. But it is exciting. You do not know. You start to relax the longer you've done it. The first time you do it, you end up sleeping not sleeping in all of your kit, because you want to be ready. If it goes in the middle of the night, you don't turn around and try and run into the window or any of that sort of stuff. You want to know where to go. Yeah. And so, it is a really, really, really big thing.
Yeah. And obviously QRA there. Did you ever intercept any Russians on your time in QRA?
No, I didn't.
You didn't get it? No.
I think, I'd tell everyone they knew I was on. No, it was a real shame. If not, I'd have a massive bear badge or something like that on the side here. There was quite a few guys did. In fact, it was one of the pilots, might have been Roger actually, who you've interviewed before. It just seemed to happen every time that he was on.
I think I can't remember what patch, you had something like 20 or something on it,
and then he was lucky in that, I say lucky, but I went to visit the squadron out and doing the Baltic air policing role. They were intercepting Russian fighters the whole time, because normally when you're doing QRA up in Scotland, it's Russian bombers that come in and are entering UK airspace. Out in the Baltics, it's Russian fighters, and you never see Russian fighters up north. So that was really interesting once the guys started doing that for the first time. So, Rod, for example, is really experienced in that sort of thing.
I think he intercepted MiG-31s or Foxbats, and I was like, well, I've never heard of that before. I thought it was always bombers.
Now, interestingly, in Iraq, when I was there with the Americans, we had Foxbats and various things taking off, but they never crossed the line, so we never had to intercept them. We came close
so you saw
on
them
a couple
on
of occasions. We saw them on the radar. That gets the heart going.
I can imagine.
With those things, because take a Foxbat, that's not designed to be a fighter against me and my little fighter. That's designed to be able to shoot down the AWACS.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So all of a sudden we go into a sort of defensive stance to make sure that the AWACS or the rivet joint is being protected. So that in itself a really interesting cat and mouse game, when you're doing those operations.
Absolutely. So how long did you spend on Typhoon, and how would you sum up the jet?
Actually, I've done 3 tours on Typhoon. So my first tour was on 3 Squadron as that first operational squadron. My second tour was when I came in as the Officer Commanding Operations Wing at Coningsby, where I deployed on various things with the Typhoon. And the third one was as Station Commander, where I kept my hand in, mainly did quick reaction alert missions, but actually flew in Malaysia, flew in Japan, flew in the States, flew with F-35, F-22. Along the way, so learned a lot about what we term 4th, 5th gen integration. So a fantastic aeroplane. Got about 700 hours on the Typhoon, and I'd sum it up as a world beater. I absolutely loved my time on the F-16, and I loved that aeroplane for what it was. I think with Typhoon you've got a level above, just because of the capability of the platform. So, where you've already got an amazing defensive aid subsuite, sensors on it, targeting pods, the ability to carry a range of missiles, Storm Shadow, Meteor now. I talked about long range of AMRAAM. Meteor is a whole different game now that you've got a ramjet engined air-to-air missile. That does turn Typhoon into something that people need to be worried about.
Really?
I think they were already. And in terms of that dogfighting BFM, lots and lots of BFM engagements. Lost a few, won most, but even against F-22, I went up and did a couple of BFM engagements against F-22. Actually, it was 2-1 to him, stupid mistake on my part. But the first one, suddenly this F-22 is really worried that I've now, beaten him.
Is it because is it something called excess power, which gives you that ability?
Yeah, so specific excess power only, is ultimately means that you have more power than you weigh.
Yeah.
So I talked about BFM. People will get me on YouTube now for hands in the bar. But if someone's turning and you start to turn into them, on an F-16, you'd keep pulling, the jet would start to bleed a bit of energy, depending on where you were, altitude or down low. In a Typhoon, more often than not, if you didn't break the back of it or come back on the power, you would sustain 9G in that turn. The other person's normally going downhill.
Yeah.
And so, you'd be pulling 9G the whole time, and the aeroplane could sustain it, which is utterly ridiculous in terms of power.
Yeah.
I was writing something the other day for someone who'd asked me about Typhoon versus Spitfire. And people are getting, well, can a Spitfire turn tightly or anything? It doesn't matter. Typhoon would just go straight up, wait until the Spitfire falls off, and then you're back down on it. The ability to go up in that dogfighting arena. Someone asked on Twitter, actually, was dogfighting relevant these days? We haven't shot anyone down since the Falklands.
Yeah.
Well, actually, with all of the quick reaction alert stuff that we're doing and intercepting Russian fighters, I think it is enormously relevant, because you wouldn't want to put if I was a pilot intercepting that Russian or whoever, I wouldn't want to be in the position where I didn't know what to do if something happened. Now, we can hope that nothing is going to happen, but I want to know what to do if something happens.
But it's the same mistake they did with the Phantom. They didn't put a gun in, and that was, a silly mistake. So
there was a long history with the gun in Typhoon, but it's absolutely the right thing to put the gun back on there for that particular mission.
Yeah. A lot of people know you from the BBMF, so tell us about this. How did you get involved, and which did you prefer to fly? That's going to be a tough one.
That's almost an impossible question. No, actually, I can give an answer on that one. But BBMF came around because it was part of my job as the Officer Commanding Operations Wing at Coningsby. So the Battle of Britain Memorial flight came under my wing, my command. And so I kind of, the OC operations and the station commander had always flown on BBMF. Still meant I had to pass all the flying tests, all of that sort of stuff. It was definitely no free pass going into this. But it allowed me to kind of close the circle, fulfill my childhood dream of seeing those Spitfires and Hurricane at Kenley Air Show, and actually, subsequently, it turns out it's probably those exact aeroplanes that I've flown. So I did 3 seasons on the flight, and was just amazing. My logbook has a particular day where I flew a Typhoon in the morning, then a Chipmunk, a Spitfire, and a Hurricane. In the same day. That's ridiculous.
Isn't it? It's crazy. But yeah, so did you have a favourite? Which was better to fly?
So the first aeroplane you fly, once you've gone through the training, is the Hurricane. Really stable aeroplane and is reasonably straightforward to fly. You then get into the Spitfire, and she flies like a maneuverable fighter. So actually, weirdly, the Spitfire is very much like the F-16, I think.
Really?
Yeah. Different in terms of, how they feel, but the same you land an F-16 and she still wants to fly all the way down to, you put the brakes on and you're getting below sort of 30 knots. Same in the Spitfire, she wants to fly all the way until you've stopped in the dispersal and the climbing out. And so completely different experiences. I guess that would be the same as sort of flying a Typhoon versus a Tornado, actually, versus an F-16. I did have a favourite aeroplane though, and that was AB910, the Mark V Spitfire at BBMF. And that was because I'd flown the Mark 9 to start with, and she felt kind of heavy, was not what I was expecting as a Spitfire. But then I got into the Mark V, the first time I flew her, as soon as I powered up, it's a light aeroplane, the tail lifted, and all of a sudden I knew I was in a Spitfire. Went off, displayed, and she flew like a dream. The controls were really well balanced. But then I came into land. I said in an interview the other day, it was an amazing trip and then not an amazing landing. And it was a short runway at Coningsby. And as I landed, it was a bit of a gusty day. I'd added a couple of knots for mum, as we came in. Landed, landing was fine. but the tail wheel was still off the ground, and I could see the sort of runway intersection coming along.
Yeah.
I thought, I know, I'll just tweak the tail wheel back on. Big mistake. She always went right on landing AB910, as the guys told me, but me forcing the tail down, there's a big gyroscopic effect. It just meant she went, pointed this way, and the gust of wind at the same time, the left wing lifted, and I arced majestically off the side of the runway, and thought, this is it, I'm going to cartwheel a Spitfire. Wrestled around with her for a little bit, came down, the right wing came back up, and I went back onto the runway, came to a halt, put the brakes on, sat there. Amazingly, my heart rate wasn't too, maybe it's because I kind of thought, that's it, I'm going to crash the thing anyway.
Yeah.
But we were both unscathed. And I've said it a couple of times, but we came to an understanding after that, and so me and her bonded at that point. It's like, some sort of wild horse almost.
Yeah.
I give her a kiss every time I go flying, and she looked after me.
I think you put that on the podcast, didn't you? Yeah, I heard that. Brilliant.
And I genuinely did. One of the guys on the flight, Smithy, always used to kiss every aeroplane, but me and AB had a good relationship.
Now you're best mates.
Well, so I was really sad. My saddest flight wasn't my last flight on BBMF. Honestly, it was I knew it was my last flight in AB910. On the way back to the couple of wingovers, that sort of thing, and say goodbye to her for the last time. It was it was an emotional day, that one.
Apart from aviation, do you have any hobbies?
Generally aviation, rugby actually is clearly the size of me not playing it, but I love watching rugby and love watching my son's a rugby player. I love watching him play rugby. That's probably a primary hobby, although you may have heard on the podcast. I don't know whether I call it a hobby just yet, but having got one of those quadcopters with the first person video things, flying that around the back garden, well, actually the area that we live in, not the back garden, we've only got a tiny little patio, it is brilliant. So just a couple of things out there, like walking the dog as well.
Brilliant. So could be a tough one. Favourite aircraft you've flown?
Honestly,
putting you under pressure here.
I genuinely don't know. I mean, given that sort of emotional connection, AB910, specifically that actual aeroplane, if you were to ask me what type of aeroplane was my favourite type, it's a really difficult one. I may say the F-16 just because of the experiences I had when I was out there in that particular time in my life. Probably all add up to that being my favourite tour, I think. Right,
yeah. And is there an aircraft you wish you could have flown in your career?
There's loads I wish I could have flown. Given that I've flown the Typhoon, I would love to fly the Tempest. The World War II Tempest.
I didn't think you were going to say. I thought you were going to say F-14 or something.
No, Pierre Klosterman's book, the Big Show, when he talks about flying Typhoon and then Tempest in the Second World War. I think that would be an amazing experience. In terms of modern fast jets, F-22, I think. I kind of, one of the deployments we did with F-22, I kind of had a holiday romance with it. Just an amazingly capable aeroplane. I mean, a proper world beater.
Yeah, I think it is.
And, when you're flying in formation on an F-22, it feels like you're flying in formation on the Starship Enterprise. Just space age, brilliant. So I think, probably F-22, I'd like to get in and have a fly around in.
And you're also a member of a podcast. Can you tell us about this?
Yeah, Pilot Episodes podcast. So that came about because it was my time on Battle of Britain Memorial Flight, where myself and Dunk Mason, Tony Parkinson, Parky, just used to sit round after, on a Saturday you'd come back, you were knackered, you'd done a ton of flying, we'd sit down and have a beer in the crew room. We just used to talk, and Parky being honestly one of the most experienced fighter pilots on the planet, has got so many stories. Dunk's got so many stories with everything that he's done, all of the Afghan operations in the Harrier, his time on the Red Arrows as well. So between us, we thought, wouldn't it be great that people could just listen to us talking? So rugby being one of my other hobbies, I'd listen to JB's podcast. He does one called Egg Chasers, another one called Rugby Dungeon. And I noticed he was following me on Twitter, so I just DM'd him and said, hey, do you fancy doing a aviation podcast? He DM'd me back within about 3 seconds and said, "What's your number?" and then phoned me within 2 minutes and said, "I'm in. What are we doing?"
Brilliant.
And so we took it from there. So we've been doing it for, as you know, about 18 months now.
Yeah.
And it's been brilliant. To me, I think people who listen to it know that we do it via Skype. The sound quality isn't brilliant sometimes, but is getting better. We're trying. But it's been like being down the pub with your mates, just talking about stuff.
It's honestly one of my favourite podcasts. I think it's probably my go-to podcast, is listening to you guys. And yeah, I like how it's so rustic, if that makes sense. Not to be insulting, but you know what I mean? It's just you blokes chatting. Love it.
Someone, I was bantering the other day that the Sunday Times didn't put us in the top 100 podcasts in the world. And everything that they had on there was almost, a BBC, a studio produced, scripted, although, a lot of those really good podcasts are not scripted. Podcast. Now, I think there is something about, we want you to feel that you're just having a drink with us down the pub, when we're talking about stuff. We'd love a bit more interaction. We'd actually like to do a live one at some point in the near future, where people can interact and ask questions.
So you mean like a museum or something, so people can watch you and
exactly. So there's sort of 4 of us on stage, or however we do it, and interact like that, because it is about the other people. We always joke there's only a couple of people listening. It is amazing. It is amazing though how many. I've been in meetings in the MOD or elsewhere, and people come up and go, really enjoy the podcast. Mm-hmm. We would like to do more of them, but especially during the summer period, where Parky, who just got his 1,000 hours Spitfire at the end of last week, is so busy doing the Spitfire flying that he does, that we're not able to crack it that much. So we've settled on once a month, which I think is good, but we've got some really good ideas. As I said the other day, I said to you earlier, we were on Queen Elizabeth, the aircraft carrier, on Tuesday.
Backdrop for a podcast,
which is pretty good. And we got an awesome chat with 2 of the guys there, James Blackmore and Ed Phillips, who both Sea Harrier pilots and both done F-18 exchanges, and they're now both involved in F-35 and on the carrier as well. So it's bringing that additional information, just exactly like you're doing, sort of peeking behind the curtain and getting the stories, getting the interviews, talking about things that, people who are not professional aviators or have an interest in aviation might enjoy listening to.
And it's great because back in the day, the only time you could get that information was either a BBC documentary or talking to people at an air show. Now it's readily available online, which is brilliant.
No, and again, thanks to guys like you, because I know when I joined, my go-to was I don't know whether you've ever seen it. You're too young to have seen it first time around, but Fighter Pilot, which followed these young men.
I knew the guy from that, actually.
Yeah, these young men through the through the system, and that to me was amazing. That's all I knew about flying up until I did it. I had none of this resource to be able to go and look. I read all the books that I could. I was saying to you last night, I ended up on YouTube watching Douglas Bader, This Is Your Life, from the late 70s. If you didn't see that or have a recording of that or found it in the library, there was no way of watching
it.
So I think, it's brilliant that, guys like you are doing YouTube, or, we have got the opportunity with a podcast to be able to get those stories out there, and honestly, I think, just one comment has made me so happy on the podcast comments on iTunes. I had someone who said, hey, stumbled across this. My young 15-year-old lad has listened, is now joining the Air Cadets and wants to join up as a pilot. Wow. That is brilliant. It's made the whole thing worthwhile.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And before we wrap up, you've been lucky enough to do some TV work, haven't you? You've taken up Ewan McGregor and James May. How did you get to do this?
Well, the James May one was interesting. I remember it was Lowell Bennett, who was my boss on 3 Squadron, said, right, who wants to take James May flying? And I went, I'll do it. And
just like that.
Just like that. And he went, all right, you're doing it. And that was it was James May's 20th century, which I think about 2007. And so James had only just got into, I think he'd been in Top Gear a few years at the time. And so was the lesser known member of Top Gear. But a lovely, lovely, lovely guy. And I was really impressed with just the ability of a professional presenter to be able to stand in front of the camera and read, not necessarily a script, because he wasn't reading a script, but say exactly the right thing in exactly the right length. And being an aviator himself, if you watch the YouTube video, he is genuinely amazed by the aeroplane, which I thought was brilliant. I also got a good chat about Top Gear and all of those sorts of things. Jim Wall's actually the guy who replaced me at Lossiemouth. was the guy who then did the Top Gear, where he raced Richard Hammond in the Bugatti, and he was in the Typhoon. So that was really interesting. And then the Ewan McGregor thing, I kind of pulled rank, I guess, a little bit up at Lossiemouth. Although it's one of those things where, in this day and age, there's not a huge amount of pilots that want to be filmed and answer personal questions.
Be up for that.
And that sort of thing. But I'd known, one of the reasons I wanted to be involved is that I'd known Colin McGregor for years and years and years.
He was ex-Tornado, wasn't he?
Yeah, ex-Tornado, and was one of the sim instructors. And I'd done back in the mid-90s the combat survival rescue course with him, and it was really great to be involved in that, and to fly Obi-Wan Kenobi. My flying career is complete now.
That's pretty cool, yeah. So, Paul, where can we find pilot episodes online? And are you yourself on Twitter or Facebook or anything like that?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter as GoddersTwit. We're on Twitter as @PilotEpisodePod online, and you can find us wherever you get your podcasts. If you just type in Pilot Episodes and download it from there.
Highly recommended.
Thank you very much. We enjoy doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Paul, thank you very much for giving a bit of your time today.
Not at all. Hey, thanks for the opportunity, and again, thanks, Mike, for everything you do. To get people's stories out onto YouTube, I think it's brilliant, and hopefully inspiring some of the pilots of the future.
Thanks very much.